Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Labdva sudurlabhamidang bahusambhavante manusham artiram anityam apihadhira turnam yatetanapatedana mrityayama nishrayasaya vishayakalu sarvata syat. This verse is spoken by Sri Krishna, the personality of Godhead. Regarding this, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said that I vow to preach this verse up to the last breath of my life. It is an instruction that every human being should take as the direction of their life. It's a very important verse. And this is the meaning of it, roughly. That human life is very rarely attained. After many, many, many births, we get the human birth. Now we have it. Anyone who can understand what I'm saying is in the human form of life. There may be other living entities in this room. Definitely in India, when we speak, there are always some ants or mosquitoes or something, some bugs flying around. They are also living beings, but they cannot understand this instruction. Even if we preach to them all day and night, they can't understand. So human life is very rarely attained, and very fortunately we have it at the present time. Human life is very valuable. Valuable inasmuch as only in human life do we have the opportunity to get free from the cycle of birth and death. It doesn't last very long. So we should very soberly consider this, and considering that we have to die soon, we should do whatever is required so that we don't have to get born again. There's a little bit more in what Krishna said in this verse, that sense gratification is available everywhere in all species. Nishrayasaya. Actually, Krishna doesn't say we should do whatever is required not to get born again. He says we should attain the highest benefit. So getting free from birth and death is actually the beginning, and above and beyond that there is attainment of pure love of Krishna. Anyway, now is the chance. And although this chance is theoretically open to every human, not everyone has the opportunity. 50 years ago in Russia, no one had the opportunity to be Krishna conscious. Those who do have the opportunity, for them there's a similar verse which Krishna spoke in the same section of Bhagavatam. It appears. Hrideham adyam sulabham sudurlabham. You can see it's almost the same words. That the human form of life is very rare, and now we got it. Tavan sukalpo guru karna dharam mayanukulyena nabhasvateritam puman bhavabdhim nataret sa'atmaha. Krishna compares the human body with a boat which is capable for crossing the terrible ocean of material existence. And the guru, if one is so fortunate to get the guidance of a guru, the guru who is the competent captain for guiding the ship. And the instructions that Krishna gives in Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam and other Shastras, these are like the favorable winds for carrying the boat in the right direction. So Krishna says, one who has all these opportunities and still does not cross the ocean of birth and death is killing themselves. To have the opportunity to be free from birth and death, to go back to Godhead and not fully utilize it is equivalent to suicide according to Krishna. So what do we have to do to get free from birth and death? Well, one should act. There are many things to do. Overall, the process of Sharanagati, taking shelter of Krishna, that begins with Anukulyasya Sankalpa. The resolve to do whatever is conducive for advancing in Krishna consciousness. And concomitant with that is pratikulyasya varjana, to resolve to forswear anything and everything which is anti-conducive or detrimental to advancing Krishna consciousness. So all the rules and regulations of Krishna consciousness are based on this. In the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu commissioned Rupa Goswami to write Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, wherein there are all the rules and regulations, or the principal rules and regulations for advancing Krishna consciousness. These fall into two categories: Vidhi and Nisheda. Vidhi means that which should be done, Nisheda means that which should not be done. Do's and don'ts. So this is all the processes given there by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, how we can make advancement in Krishna consciousness. Srila Prabhupada's translation of the Nectar of Devotion, of the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, he titled it The Nectar of Devotion, and he added his own subtitle, The Complete Science of Bhakti Yoga. Srila Prabhupada often said that Krishna consciousness is a science. What is meant by that? Does it mean that when you take to Krishna consciousness you have to put on a white jacket and go into a lab with test tubes? No. It means that there is a specific process which, if it is followed, it will give the specified result. Just like, for instance, in chemistry, if you mix an acid with a base, then there's effervescence and salt and water is produced. It's predictable. There's a specific action is taken and there's a specific reaction. So in Bhakti Yoga, if we follow the process, then we make advancement. And if we don't follow, then we don't make advancement. Or we may follow to some degree. When we're talking about Bhakti Yoga, we're talking about our consciousness, Krishna consciousness. So consciousness is a much more complex phenomenon than mixing of acids and bases. It's very complex, inasmuch as everyone's consciousness has so many desires from so many births deep in the consciousness. We were discussing that yesterday, vasana. Our consciousness is influenced not only by our previous lives, but by our present association. The science of psychology is, it's not a precise science in the sense that we think of physical sciences. Although in the physical sciences, the more advanced levels we get to, the more subtle it becomes also. Anyway, basically we can say if we follow the rules and regulations given by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, then we make advancement. It's not exactly a mechanical process, because as Srila Prabhupada notes in the preface to the Nectar of Instruction, advancement in Krishna consciousness depends on the attitude of the performer. So it is possible to follow all the rules and regulations and not make much advancement. That's also possible. That is mentioned in the Nectar of Instruction itself. Niyamagraha, to be enthusiastic for rules and not enthusiastic for loving Krishna. There's also another meaning of niyamagraha, not to follow any rules, or just doing bhakti however we want at our own level. But basically the rules, they are meant to help us advance. What are the rules? Well, there are so many, I won't list them all here. Even if I could remember them, I wouldn't. But rising early, chanting the holy name of Krishna, hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, associating with devotees, taking only food offered to Krishna. So if we follow these naturally help us to advance in Krishna consciousness. Now, at the time of initiation, we don't vow to follow so many small rules. Well, maybe small, I shouldn't say that. Things like hearing Srimad Bhagavatam is nothing small. But we vow to chant 16 rounds daily of the Mahamantra and to follow 4 regulative principles. But actually there are many more that we should follow if we're going to make advancement. Now, one thing I'm noticing is that many of our devotees, for them 16 rounds and 4 regulated principles, that's just it and not much else. And sometimes we hear about 3.5 principles. and very liberal interpretation of the other principles also. So, of course, every jiva is an individual living being. So we have a certain amount of independence. But 16 plus 4 shouldn't be the all in all of our spiritual life. We have to apply ourselves to the process to get the result of it. Otherwise, we're in danger of becoming something like Christians who just believe in the mercy of Jesus. I don't know in Russia much about the Christian culture. Probably most of you don't know much about it either. I don't know. But at least in the part of the world where I was born this time round, there's this idea that, well, just Jesus is merciful. You just believe in Jesus and that's it. So now we also have the Prabhupada is merciful. Now we have within our movement the Prabhupada is merciful interpretation. There's no doubt that Srila Prabhupada is very merciful. He mercifully came to this world and taught us the process of Krishna consciousness. But we have to do our part also. Okay, time for a joke. It's a Jewish joke. I'm not sure if they're allowed, but anyway. So Shlomo was lamenting that, you see, one of my friends, he won the lottery. Then another one won the lottery. Another one won the lottery. But I don't know why God, He never lets me win the lottery. I think it's time for this girl to be taken out. So Shlomo's lamenting, God, He doesn't like me. I never win the lottery. All my friends win the lottery, I never win it. So one day God got fed up of Shlomo complaining, and He came to Shlomo and said, okay, Shlomo, let's make a deal. I will let you win the lottery, but you have to do something also. First of all, you have to buy a ticket. So Prabhupada's mercy is there, but we have to do our part also. You like that one, huh? We want everything from Prabhupada, we want everything from God, but we're not prepared to do little thing ourselves. Just, I believe in Prabhupada's mercy, that's all. Yeah, so for the bhakti science to work, we have to follow it. Tivrina bhakti yogena yajeta purusham param. We often hear the first line of this verse quoted. First line, anyone? Akama sarvakama va moksha kama udhara dhihi. Whether one is free from desires, is full of desires, or desires liberation, one should worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So there you are. So even if you're full of material desires, you should worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But there's one important word in that verse which I didn't translate and is often left out of the translation. That one should very intensely engage in Bhakti Yoga. The idea that I have all material desires and then sometimes when I wake up in the morning I say Hare Krishna. So that's enough. That's not the import of this verse. Tivrena means with great intensity. That means that we're really trying. We're really focused on practicing Krishna consciousness. So it's nice to be a devotee. I hope you're all thinking that, experiencing that. There are so many other things you could do on a warm day in Moscow, but you have all chosen to come here. You all like to chant Hare Krishna, take prasadam, mix with the devotees. So it's very nice to be a devotee of Krishna, no doubt. But real practice of bhakti has to be intense on a daily basis. If we consider the standard process that Srila Prabhupada gave to his disciples, there's a lot of time, many hours every day spent directly on practices of Krishna consciousness. Rising early in the morning, then having arati, kirtan, class, japa, in the day reading books, and in the evening program also. That's just for our own personal sadhana, not to speak of other services for spreading the mission. So we're talking about several hours of sadhana every day. Now it's understood that most devotees in the modern age, they're grihastas. Please turn off that machine that's making that noise. And most people in the modern world, in the big cities, even without Krishna consciousness, they're very busy. Just to meet the material needs, people, they're very busy most of the time. I can imagine that the average Muscovite must spend at least 15 hours a week just traveling to and from work. What to speak of traveling, going to the shops and all this kind of thing. So life is very intense anyway. And on top of that, to have a full program of sadhana, just for most people it just seems impossible. Plus, living in the big city with all materialistic people, it just sucks your energy. It's very difficult to have high spiritual thoughts if you're living in the rat race, or whatever the Russian equivalent of that is. So we see that many of our Grihastha devotees all over the world, they settle into some kind of routine in which there's some kind of Krishna consciousness. They're just surviving both materially and spiritually. They don't rise early, and it's 16 plus 4 at the best. 16 rounds, 4 eggs, and that's it. And this seems to be more or less accepted within our movement nowadays. Come to the temple once a week, attend festivals, and then the rest of the week it's just somehow or other get by in Krishna consciousness, if at all. But then we may ask that, well, what about the going back to Godhead part? What about doing whatever is required so that we don't have to get another body? How is that going to happen? We may wonder then why we initiate people at all. The essence of initiation is actually not 16 rounds or 4 regulated principles. It is this attitude of surrender to Krishna. That it's the vow to dedicate our life in the service of Krishna. Dikha kale bhakta kare atta shamarpan. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said that at the time of initiation, the devotee, they surrender themselves. Now, it's not that it's impossible to be Krishna conscious in family life. Srila Prabhupada often gave the example of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, who, despite having heavy governmental responsibilities and a large family, was still an ideal Krishna conscious person. In fact, he's not only that, he's a unique acharya. But Srila Prabhupada also writes in one purport in Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita that the advancement of most householders is very slow or zero. So you can judge for yourself which pole you are closest to. If, like Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he spent many hours every day directly engaged in Krishna's service. Okay, well, I hope everyone's not totally depressed by now. If we take an analysis of what we should be doing and what we are doing, just as an empirical analysis, we would find that most of our devotees are not doing what is required according to Guru, Sadhu and Shastra to go back to Godhead. This is a very serious syndrome, actually, because if we take it as normal that bhakti yoga should be not tivra, then what's the point of it anyway? What are we doing? Tivra means intense. Then all kinds of impurities will enter. If we're not focused on completely surrendering to Krishna, then all kinds of, well, that in itself is a great impurity, and from that all other kinds of impurities will enter. Then kirtan becomes a performance. The classes, Bhagavatam, discussions, they become more for religious entertainment than for motivating and instructing devotees on the path back to Godhead. And the essence is lost. Srila Prabhupada had a solution for all of this, that how we can be saved, how having taken to Krishna consciousness with the motive to dedicate our life to Krishna, we can be saved from the mediocrity of wishy-washy so-called Krishna consciousness. Of course, individually, some devotees, they may be very strong, and even in the city, they practice very strongly. But many, they're just not, the time constraints are such that they're just not able to. And then others, even if they could rise early, have chanting, arati, all these things, they don't, because that's the norm, and they just presume that's what everyone does. You just get up whenever you like and do whatever you like. So Srila Prabhupada had a great social cum spiritual welfare program. And it wasn't going to feed old people in their old age homes. His program was that Grihastha devotees should live on the land, very simply, and establish Varnashram communities. Or at least this point, living on the land, growing our own food, living simply. That way we get devotee association. We can have programs together. We don't need to work to produce so many things that we don't need. So far our movement hasn't taken this very seriously. Most devotees are horrified even at the mention of the word Varnashram. If they even hear the word, they feel like having a nervous breakdown. No doubt it's austere, but then again, sitting in a traffic jam every day in Moscow is also austere. And associating with non-devotees is horrible. We can go among them to distribute books and preach, but to have to live with them, talk with them, it's drags the consciousness down. So this is the program to help lift us above the mediocre practice of Krishna consciousness. No doubt there is austerity there, but we have to see what are the priorities in our life. Is our priority to live comfortably, so-called comfortably in the city and chant Hare Krishna at some level, or to do whatever is required so that we don't get born again, so that we actually go back to Godhead? Of course, there's no guarantee that we will go back to Godhead we can't force it, we can't demand it. But there is a process which is given by Shastra and by the Acharyas. So if we follow that, that will help us to make advancement. So we may say, well, just chant Hare Krishna and be happy. We don't have to worry about all these fantastic ideas like leaving the city. But chant Hare Krishna and be happy means be happy in surrender to Krishna. There's another kind of happiness. That's described by Krishna in Bhagavad Gita. Bhoga Ishvarya prasaktanam taya parhita chetasam vyavasayatmaka buddhya samadho na vidhiyate. Persons who are attached to comfortable life, opulent life, their consciousness remains covered, and therefore the one-pointed determination to become absorbed in spiritual life doesn't take place. Regarding austerity, I visited one community of devotees in India who are making such a program. And one devotee said to me there that, yes, it's very austere for the body compared to city life. If you want hot water for bathing, well, you have to collect wood, burn it, heat the water, and so on. It's not just you open the tap. So it's austere for the body, but it is just so much better for the mind. So we actually become very happy. If at all, we don't like to go to the city, and if we go, we just feel it's just all the vibrations, it's just something disturbing. And a farm community, again in India, one devotee who's been living there for some time, Grihastha, he said something similar to me. He said, yeah, well, it's difficult living here. So I said to him, well, just consider, what did you come for? I said to him that you're getting every day, you're going to Mangalati, you're having a full morning program, 7 days a week, 24 hours, you're always in association with devotees. You didn't have any of that when you were living in the city. So I said, yeah, that's right. It's some sacrifice to change the way of life, but the gain is that we gain everything that is required for advancing in Krishna consciousness. At another community in India again, when I arrived, I saw two devotees, husband and wife. They were previously living in the city, and they were very good, serious devotees. And then I saw them some months after they had moved to the farm community. And I said to them, your faces have become dark and bright. Cryptic statement. Because in India it's hot country, so anyway Indians' faces tend to be dark, but if they go in the sun more, they become significantly more dark. So their faces had become visibly darker, but visibly brighter also with happiness. And they said, oh, we're so happy we came here. They were earning, only the husband was working, but he was earning in high brackets, significantly more than most people. He said, we're so happy we've come here, that it's so peaceful, away from the stress of the city. We don't want to go to the city. Every day we naturally take rest early, just after sundown, and then we naturally get up early every morning. We have every day, all day, just Krishna conscious activities, living very simply, no anxiety. So they had decided, and the group of devotees, Grihastha devotees, they decided they wanted to do this primarily for the sake of their children, because they didn't want to raise their children in the materialistic cities. And there are so many other advantages. Another major or interrelated duty of our movement, which we haven't taken up, is protection of cows. So it's a great challenge to take this up. Both anyone individually who wants to take up this simple living and high thinking, it's a great challenge, no doubt. And it's a great challenge for our movement as a whole to do this. It's relatively easy to go along with what we're doing, having temples, book distribution, Harinam in the cities. These are all necessary and glorious activities. But Srila Prabhupada also gave us the responsibility to develop this simple living, high-thinking Varnashram communities. Otherwise, what happens, we're preaching Krishna consciousness, and we give people the knowledge of the greatest opportunity of human life, but we're not giving a means by which they can actually practice that. It's not the process given by our acharyas that we practice Krishna consciousness just somehow or other at some level and somehow or other get by. Srila Prabhupada said that these farm communities, that would be a new phase of our movement. We might think, well, why should people leave the cities? In the cities they can go on Harinam at least once a week or distribute books once a week. But Srila Prabhupada said this would be a new phase of our movement. And instead of having the opportunity to go on Harinam once a week, that we have daily kirtan with devotees and 24 hours a day in the association of devotees. And devotees on these communities, they might not do much direct preaching, but then most devotees in the city also don't do much direct preaching. And again, the preaching they do is to bring people to a level of Krishna consciousness which isn't really the level that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Rupa Goswami and Srila Prabhupada wanted to bring us to. So it's not that all grihastas have to go to the land, and probably most won't, even if you preach to them day and night, they wouldn't. But it seems that was Srila Prabhupada's plan for most of his grihasta disciples. And that in itself is one form of preaching. If we can actually demonstrate to people how you can live a fully God-conscious life, even in family life, that we don't care for this stupid consumer, money-driven society. The things that you think are important, we give no importance to them whatsoever. Big house, big car, big bank balance, these are just toys for children. The real goal of life is to develop our love for Krishna. So that is very powerful preaching. So these are some thoughts that taken from Srila Prabhupada's teachings. I've been saying these things for quite some years, about 40 years actually. And well, I don't know about Russia, but in some places, some devotees, they became inspired by that, and then they're actually doing that. So the 3 stages of making a decision: thinking, feeling. Well, we think about something, or the thought comes in our mind, let's say that. Then we mull it over, we consider it, and then we decide, yes, I'm going to do this. So I don't expect all of you to run out of here and grab a hoe or a spade. And probably better you don't. If you're going to do this, go step by step. But at least you can take it as food for thought. Start to think about it. And maybe even if you feel you're not able to do it yourself, you could recommend it to others. And actually the way this modern society is going, even without Krishna consciousness, which is, we don't even want to think about life without Krishna consciousness, but even without Krishna consciousness, is very good advice to get out of these horrible cities and live peacefully and grow your own food. And there is actually in America at the present time a whole phenomenon of this, that quite a few people who are highly qualified and can earn lots of money, young married people, are deciding to get out of the city, live on the land and grow their own food. They're not devotees. Just even from the material point of view, to have a more sane kind of life. They want to get out of the insane cities. Okay, Hare Krishna. Any questions? Give me that water to drink. Why do so few senior devotees speak about this? Ask them. They have, Prabhupada, he clearly emphasized this. So disciple means you have to follow the Guru. You have to ask them. I don't know why. What's their problem? Yeah. Oh, actually, I have heard some devotees saying something like, well, in the future, we're not ready for that. In future, we'll do this kind of thing. Well, when will that future come? In the meantime, we're going to die, and then we don't go back to Godhead. And then at the gate of Vaikuntha say, well, you're not ready yet. We need it now. Prabhupada spoke about having it now. Prabhupada didn't say you're not ready yet. Srila Prabhupada didn't have to come to the West and preach Krishna consciousness. He could have said, they're not ready yet. We weren't ready. Prabhupada made us ready. Someone else had?
Yeah, the second question is, what should be the first step? What should we do?
What is the first step? The first step is to discuss it with like-minded devotees. There are some devotees under my guidance in India who are doing some projects like this. And they did a lot of research actually before they actually moved to the land. What kind of land is suitable? What kind of crops they can grow, what kind of buildings they can construct for residents, and then for Gurukul, a lot of research. And then rules and regulations for devotees who are living there. Many issues rise, such as, for instance, if among the husband and wife one is very dedicated and enthusiastic, but the other doesn't want to work much. They're devotees, but they don't want to do much. They're not much interested in rising early. How do you deal with such cases? So many such issues arise, and you can't predict them all in advance. I gave a lecture about this, actually. I called Sailing into Uncharted Waters. So we're not exactly sure what we're doing, but we have the order of Guru and Krishna. So we have to be bold and careful at the same time. We hear about successful military generals, how they're bold. So to make this move, it's a very bold move. But successful generals, they're not just bold, they're also very intelligent and very careful. They have to consider so many different factors, so many things that can go wrong. And to make the successful communities, it's not just a matter of going and living on the land, but it requires a very strong spiritual commitment. If there's a strong spiritual program every day, then devotees will be happy on the spiritual platform, which is, after all, the real reason for committing to such a project. Anything else? Then you can say it in Russian now. Varna Sankara don't belong to any Varna. They come in the mixed group. At best you can say Shudras. We're not even, by birth, we're not even Varna Sankara. We're below that. Varna Sankara means children of mixed Varnas, but we're not even there. Yeah, there's a question now.
Я правильно расслышал, какое самое яркое событие в вашей жизни?
It's not a philosophical question. Any question now?
Это не философский вопрос. Все слышали, да, просто повторяю. So, for a cow to give milk, it requires to give birth to a calf at least once every few years. In India, where it's not so cold, cows can graze all year round. But in Russia and in other cold countries, it's not possible to do so. And to maintain the cattle requires a lot of finance. What to do under these circumstances?
Yeah, I'm not going to answer that. In India also nowadays, the grazing lands are much reduced and crops have to be grown for the cows also. So I'm not going to answer that because I don't know the answer. There must be an answer. Finance, finance will be required for purchasing land, and then you have to grow food for the cows rather than raising money for the cows. But there are many such technical questions which we shall have to find answers for. I'm not saying it's easy going to the land. I'm just saying that it is a program given by Srila Prabhupada and by Krishna to help us get out of this miserable material world and go to Krishna. So yeah, all these things need researching. Yeah, it's coming. There's one written question. There are more.
So, which devotees or some devotees should remain in the cities? So, what should be their status?
Yes, preaching. For those who are in the city, they should remain those who are preaching. Spiritual standards should be the basic ones that Prabhupada gave us. I never heard Prabhupada say that there's different standards for different people. Again, if we are to examine neutrally or empirically, the minimum standards that Prabhupada gave us, most devotees don't come anywhere near that, actually. So we can't expect to make very good advancement in such a situation. Is there a time limit? I thought we were going up to 5 o'clock, yeah. So, yeah. No, there are other questions. Yeah.
Как возможно жить всю жизнь среди 20 членов общины безвыездных?
What question is that? I mean, what's the difficulty? Is you're addicted to city life? Anyway, it doesn't. Why 20? Communities can be bigger, smaller. We're addicted to the adrenaline rush of the big city. We think unless there's flyovers and subways, and it's not civilization. Civilization means in sattva-gun. This rajagun of rushing around, making money, and tamagun of slaughterhouses and drinking alcohol. This is not civilization. Yeah, there's one question there.
Происходит ли разделение по варнам в общине? Это вопрос, да? Is there any division into varnas in this agricultural?
Yeah, should there be? Yes, there should be divisions of varnas and ashrams, but the first thing is to go to the land and grow your own food, and of course chant Hare Krishna. And then once the basic economy is in shape, then it can start to be organized. Okay, so Another question?
You mentioned that Vikasas are toys for kids. How can we get rid of the attachment? How can we get rid of?
How can we be free from the desire to have big house, big cars, big bank balance? So that is the duty of the sadhus, to speak in such a way that those desires will be cut. What is that verse? Satso sajjeta buddhiman. What is that verse? The second line I remember. Satsu sajjeta buddhiman. I just can't remember it now. Anyway, that's another verse from that same section of Bhagavatam that I started the class of Krishna speaking to Uddhava. Tato dursanga utsraja satsu sajjeta buddhiman santa evasya chindanti manovya sangam uktibihi. Therefore, Krishna says that having some understanding of the futility of material life, therefore, futility of material life. Therefore, Krishna says, one should give up avoid bad association and associate with sadhus. And sadhus, they will cut our mental attachments by their sharp words. So generally we think a sadhu is someone who smiles at us and says peace, love. But according to Krishna, a sadhu is someone who by his harsh words cuts our material attachments. Generally we don't like such sadhus. Hare Krishna. Another question is, whenever you think we're finished, there's one more.
The regular 10 temple programs, there's 7 in the family. And these 2 girls, can they get spiritual names?
Yeah, they can get spiritual names.
Конечно. The senior is Rosa, and the junior is Zara.
So what names do you suggest for them? You don't know? Rosa means like a flower, isn't it? Rose, yeah. So one name for Lakshmi is Kamala, means a lotus flower. Kamala.
Lakshmi Kamala.
Then the other one is I. Then you can say Indira, that's another. Zarina. Oh, I don't know any names beginning with Z. Then call her Gopi. Give some name. Nice sadhu. Okay, so we'll finish that. Huh? Yeah.